Well, all right. We are back, and it is Thursday, Thursday morning, and I'm joined by both of my astrological cats today. Of course, it wouldn't be an Astro Weather without Peachy, the astrological cat. There she is, getting her morning pets on, and then Jasper, the old bones, the old golden bones, spent the night with me last night. Climbed up on the bed. Yeah, that's right, buddy. Although I did not have a great night sleeping last night. How often do you hear that? Well, we'll talk about moonlight, which is what I used last night, and it helped me, believe it or not. But I was, when I go to bed earlier, I just tend to wake up earlier. It's just the nature of the beast. And I was in bed and asleep by 11:30, and I'm up by 4:30, 5 hours. There we go. I couldn't get back to sleep. And then, unfortunately, what I'll do is I'll listen to an interview as I go to bed. And the last thing I remember listening to was an old video of Alex Jones at a comedy club called, I think, Laughs, which is in Houston. And that's where Joe Rogan and Bill Hicks and a bunch of these guys were doing their comedy shtick. And Alex was talking about how he just came back from the Bohemian Grove. And it's a much younger version of Alex, for sure. And you can see in that exchange how Joe Rogan already has his interview style. It's kind of baked into him with these questions he's asking Alex about the whole thing. And that's the last thing I remember. And then when I woke up, I'm listening to this guy who was the engineer on the Steely Dan Asia sessions, which I have to say, once I'm up and I'm listening to this thing, God damn if it wasn't interesting. I have to say it was really, really interesting. So for all you musicians there, I'm going to geek out, or music lovers, I'm just going to geek out for a second because I had never known this. I knew that the big moment on the album, and maybe one of the top 3 musical passages in the Steely Dan catalog, is when Steve Gadd goes into his drum solo in this very, very long, extended passage, right? And it was the story about how all that happened and some of the recording stuff around it. So this is how different the world was back then. They brought in Steve Gadd's drum kit. He was going to be there for 2 days. And it was a special candy apple red, I think it was maple. That was the wood that the drums were made out of, and had all this special symbols. Everything was completely set up. It was going to be there for 2 days. And Steve Gadd had this reputation of being a bit tough on the band that he played wherever he played, except with Walter and Donald, who were tougher on the musicians than they could be on them. So they get everything set up, and this engineer gets a call from another producer named Richard Perry. And Richard Perry produced people like Bonnie Raitt and Neil Young and Jackson Browne. He was part of that kind of avocado mafia scene. And he had heard that Steve Gadd was in town and really loved his work on the Paul Simon track, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. And he was producing a record by Leo Sayer. And Leo Sayer, he convinced this engineer, it's like, when do they start recording? 2:00. We've got to be, if you're going to do anything, you've got to be done by 1. Meaning, if you're going to bring Leo over, And he didn't even know what was going on. Richard Perry just brings Leo Sayer over, and he cuts 3 tracks with Steve Gadd on the drums. Of course, Steve gets paid. And this is not on the studio time for Steely Dan. And the tracks that he plays on it, You Make Me Feel Like Dancing, you know, that song, basically the 3 biggest Leo Sayer hits. And they just go and get the drum pieces for these tracks. Lickety split, boom, done. And then Gadd goes into the Steely Dan sessions. I'd never known that before. And the other thing, this is interesting, what's not in the interview, but they had charted everything. Like Larry Carlton, the guitar player, wrote all the charts for all the musicians, which was, man, if you're Fagan and Becker, I mean, you got to be paying them for that, right? Because it's an arrangement credit, at least, or partial credit. So the way that Steve Gadd had his sheets lined up, this was in the comments. There was a person there who was the drum tech. And he talked about how Steve Gadd's charts went from right to left in front of the drum, in front of the kit, so he wouldn't have to turn the page. Right? It was just like he would just look at it, and he could look at everybody else while he was playing. And if you haven't heard the drum section on Asia, I highly, highly recommend. It's not just the drums, the entire song, because you got some very deep composition. Anyway, I was geeking. I'm like, oh, God, I'm up now. And then this guy in the comments says, this is a little known fact, but through the side door of the studio, and this is like, in LA, the studios are located in kind of a seedy area. Some of them are in better areas. But in the side door of the studio, in walks George Martin. So George Martin was there the day that they were cutting the famous Steve Gadd drum break. And who knows? Who knows what kind of magic Martin might have woven into that mix, because he was an amazing producer. Anyway, by that time, I'm just up, right? I'm up. And I have actually stuff to do today, so I decided to just stay up. Welcome to the show. How is everybody? I've been checking in on chat. And one of the things that I am going to do 15 minutes today, but I kept resisting watching the entire spectacle of the Charlie Kirk thing. There's a part of me that just doesn't want to watch it. And I'm really okay with not watching it, because I know enough about it, and I know enough about what's going on to have a relatively reasoned and seasoned voice, which I'll talk about over on 15, because there's something incredibly wrong in the world today. I was going through the comments, and Julie was talking about how she went into this very, very deep, deep, deep wave of grief for her husband, who's no longer here. And I just want to confirm that grief is ambient right now. There is a time last night where I was sitting around, and I don't always feel this way, even when I'm not feeling all that great physically. I rarely get bluesy, and last night I started to get the blues. I was just feeling really blue, and then I don't know, maybe 90 minutes later, I get a text from my kid, and he's cracking, right? Like he's having this moment where and I don't think it's a bad moment, but he's cracking, and he has a lot of stress and pressure in his life. And and you have to remember he's young. He's college age. And I'm sure Charlie Kirk's souls touched the campus of the University of Arkansas at some point. And when Charlie Kirk got off, whatever you believe, I believe he was offed at this point. It stirred up a lot of conversation with his peer group. So he basically said to me, "What the hell am I doing in this world?" He's seen a broken world. He's seen a world. He's got the they live glasses on now, and we all go through that at some point. We all go through. Usually, for most of us, it happens around 14, 15, when we go through that Saturn opposition, and you see the world from a very different perspective. And the word that I would use would be hypocritical. That for the first time in our lives, we separate out from our own family and our own culture, and we see with a different set of eyes. And it's kind of happening to him now because he's at that 3/4 spin of Saturn, right at 21, hits you at 21. It's a major time. It's a really major time. And he's got Saturn in Cancer. So this whole Saturn square with Saturn and Aries, it's already kicking in. And back to the first Saturn square that people experience right around the age of 6, 7, right around there. And they literally go into grade school, and there's that whole socialization process. And over on 2021, right, you're at that 3/4 point. And for some people actually graduate from college at 21, 22. He won't. I didn't. But generally, that's concurrent. If it's not concurrent, you're going through the crisis while you're in an institution of higher learning. And it coincides, from what I've read, that when we're born, we have this ethereal sort of amniotic sac that protects us. It's like body. It's like the thymus, right? The thymus is there to help boost your immune system when you're younger. And after a certain point, it just doesn't really function in the same way. So it's sort of like the plasma thymus. But as we reach the age of 21, again, this is spiritual, quote unquote, science, right? That begins to decay. And so this feeling of being protected, this feeling of being in sort of a cosmic womb of some sort, breaks down. And that coincides with what happens at 21. And that's that third movement of Saturn right before you get to the next one, which is the Saturn return. And it mimics that first square at the age of 6 and 7. So socialization is like embedded in this square. And, and what I heard was the voice of somebody who is looking into the future that looks very dark and very confusing. And I think that this is a real epidemic. And I'm going to get into more of this over on 15 Minutes of Flame. So if you find yourself in the midst of pathos or grieving or sadness, there's a reason why. Because this world that we have been living in is ending. I have to decline this. This world that we're living in is ending. And there is a sadness that goes along with that. That the things that we used to invest in, love, even just mundane things like basic order, like that's all going away. And we're about to tumble into a very disturbing and anarchic period of time. And you may be able to have wonderful things going on in your personal life, and I salute that and I celebrate it. And don't let anybody rain on your parade, okay? But the overwhelming zeitgeist is not a good one. It's not a good one. And again, I'm going to get into more of this over on 15. So if you find yourself feeling down or depressed or anxious, there's a reason why. It's because the plates are shifting beneath our feet as we speak. In fact, yesterday they even had a little bit of a trembler starting in Oakland, and it rolled on over to San Francisco. So literally the plates are shifting beneath our feet. And when we get to periods like this is where major events happen. Cataclysms, mini apocalypses. I don't know if you guys caught well, you didn't catch them, but there was a shooter at the Ice Center in Dallas. Some guy got on a roof. Sound familiar? And started firing indiscriminately into one of the ICE vans. Now, you have to ask yourself, well, why did that happen? Is it somebody who's against ICE, who's against Trump, who's against deportation? Or is it yet another mind-controlled patsy to reinforce this idea that there are roofs and there are shooters? And I remember when there was a shooting in North Carolina, and the shooter's name was Dylan Roof. I always thought that was a really interesting name. Dylan Roof. And he was the shooter in Charleston, South Carolina, supposed white supremacist. Well, what's interesting is that Dylan Roof essentially did nearly the exact same thing that Luigi Mangione and Tyler Robinson did. Luigi went to McDonald's. Tyler went to Dairy Queen. The cops, after he supposedly shot up that church, took him to Taco Bell. And in a weird way, he kind of kicks this whole thing off, right? This is April. He was born on April 3rd, 1994. And the shooting takes place in 2015. So we're about a year out from Trump, a little bit over that. So we're still in Obama land. And it's one of those early shootings, right? I mean, there were others, don't get me wrong, but this is one of the more modern versions of the lone wolf as a teen. Interesting, his last name is Roof. Anyway, let's get into the show. I have a lot to cover, and I'm going to be doing 15 minutes at 9:10. I'll be there for an hour, and then I've got to go off and see the high priest of Western medicine. Yeah, Dylan Stormroof. That's his middle name. The whole thing stumped me. You know, I did the math on that. I was very into that whole shooting. And I got so granular that I found where the nearest police station was in relationship to the church that he supposedly shot up, and how long it would take for them to get there if it was being 911. And the amount of time, and they don't take lights, they just burn through traffic lights. The amount of time that it would take for the cops to get there and the time that they got there, it doesn't match. It doesn't match. Anyway, I don't want to get too lost in the weeds, but my critical analysis is that he's a patsy. He's a patsy. And it started this trend of forgiving the shooter like a day or two after, or 3 days after. There was this young black guy who I think went on to play a little minor league baseball. And I think his grandmother or mother, aunt, or maybe all three of them, they were there. And 3 days after, he's just, well, I forgive the shooter. And it was like the same thing that Erica Kirk said, and the same thing that Austin Metcalf's dad said. It's like almost like they're programmed to immediately forgive. It's very weird. I mean, maybe that's just being reflexively Christian, but I have my doubts because that's how I'm wired. All right, let's see who we got here today. Let's do a quick check-in. There's Michael. What's up, Michael? KK, what's up? Julie, that thumbnail, babe, that's from Star Trek, by the way. I'm trying to do like babes of Star Trek for the thumbnail for Libra, because the first series has got some just absolutely stunningly beautiful women, real women, right, with real bodies and real curves. Unfortunately, most of the pictures are at a lower resolution, maybe 750K lower. Not the best for a thumbnail unless I build something around it, right? But that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to do some of the an homage to the beauty, right? An homage to the beauty of the women of Star Trek and Libra and Venus, sort of a looking back. Okay, let's see who do we have. The new next in the house. Big Dave, I heard it's your birthday. Yeah. Happy trip around the sun, brother Dave. Ole Kobe, hello. Reminds me of the old TV show Quark. That old TV show we called Star Trek. I don't know, maybe they called it Quark where you are. We called it Star Trek. There's Tom Jordan. AM, what's up? Jackie Delario. Debisu. Whit, you're on my list today. I got a drive ahead of me, so I'll give you a call. Triple J, do you think that necklace would improve my Wi-Fi reception? I should wear it here if it does, because I've often been accused of glitching out. She was a member of a group called The Thrall, and she was training Kirk, right? She was Kirk's trainer. He loved that. Privacy Anti-Scum, what's up? The news going into HEB. Have fun. Just remember, they move shit around all the time. Another day, another day in the one infinite creation. Hey, the big cheese is giving us a little ray of sunshine. We'll take it. On the other hand, over there in good morning, all dreary Irish day here in Kingston. Got my 2-mile walk and use my vibration plate. Now, that's called self-care. Good for you. Lisa Ann White's here, misbehaving too. Christina Maria, good morning from communist Canada. Comida. Can we just call it Comida? Still waiting for Alberta to split off and make me look like a prophet. Bill Smith's here, Kelly B. Desley Logan. Hi, Desley. Stephanie Hunter, the Soul Traveler. Vivi, a very wet and rainy day. Shades of Hurricane Helene. I'm telling you, once Neptune retrogrades into Pisces, it is typhoon season. Nice lights here, Sandra D. Catherine Faulkner. Today happens to be William Faulkner's birthday. I'm sure you knew that, Catherine. Nicole DePaulo. Hello, Nicole. Let's see. Yeah, get some of those moonlight gummies. They actually helped me sleep last night. You know, I try to. I'll use the moonlights for about a week, and then I'll back off, and that's when I use the melatonin gummies. Although that's why I went strictly to the moonlight last night because the melatonin put me in the pits of hell the other night. Devin Dewar, Double D, what's up? What's happening? Zerlith, Eternal. We got Ratchet Boo. What's up, Ratchet Boo? Good to see you. Good morning, Steely Dan. There for me when life really gets tough at 15. We lost 3 friends in a crash for days. After all, we just rode around piling a huge car listening to Asia. Steely Dan's got kind of a salutary effect because they're not really sweet or saccharine, but they touch on these areas of human existence. Like they have this one song called Any Major Dude with Half a Heart. Really will tell you, my friend, any day the world falls apart, comes together again. Any modern day the world comes together again. When the demon is at your door, in the morning it won't be there no more. No more. Any major dude will tell you. I used to play this song for my son a lot when we would drive around. He was young. He knew the words of that song. So I sent him that song this morning. But that's a great song to listen to if you want to evoke something. Yeah, I found this really fascinating interview with Carlos Alomar, who is the longtime guitar player for David Bowie. He is so smart. So smart. And Luther Vandross, he grew up with Luther Vandross. And Luther Vandross had a very hard time towards the end of his life. He started to go through dementia and short-term memory loss. And Carlos would play Luther songs that he knew, like he would play Michael Jackson. And he was able to take, for that brief period of time, he was able to take Luther Vandross into some kind of place of cognitive awareness through the music. But when the music stopped, he would drift into being lost again. But he made a very solid case for music as this tool that hooks into our emotional body and our emotional well-being. And so when we listen to songs that have meaning for us or have an effect on us or bring us back into some kind of harmonic resonance to a different time, even if it's digital, it can be very salutary. So never underestimate the power of music, especially as you're going through the blues. Healing Heart Rosie's here. What's up, Healing? Tammy Lynn, Catherine Rosen, maybe Miss BC. Miss BC, I tossed and turned all night too. Had 2 bad dreams previous night. Mars in conjunct Neptune, Uranus simultaneously. Yeah, man. The psychic weather is heavy. And it, sometimes there are people who are unburdened by what they have done or what has been. And if you're in that space in your life right now, like you're carrying the joy frequency for a lot of other people. And don't feel guilty about it. Right? Don't feel guilty about it. Because your time will come, motherfuckers. Your time will come. No, I'm just kidding. No, don't feel guilty about it. In fact, it plays an essential role. And it reminds us that there are people that are carving out lives that have meaning and soul. And that's really important. Let's see. Talking music, great vibe. Moon Villain, what's up, Moon Villain? Let's see. I absolutely do not want to. I can't bring myself to it. I know enough already. This is the burden of being a splenic projector. I get to the finish line very quickly. I'm not always right, but I'm right a lot more than I'm not. And I've been doing this for a long time. So my systems are pretty attuned, let's put it that way. So it's easy to get to the end of something now much faster without having to prove my work and look at this and look at this and look at this and look at this. Although some people are still sort of stumbling in the dark, aren't they? Christine Foos, Amy Gill, what's up? The BC's ventilator melted and burned into the floor. Wow. Steely Dan reminds you of cocaine. That'll do it. That was, you know, it was a really interesting contrast with that interview. By the way, I have a 9-minute interview I'm going to play you on 15 minutes. You have to watch it. It is one of the most brilliant pieces of wisdom I've ever heard and expressed through a real life experience. And it comes through Larry Wilcox, who is Eric Estrada's partner on Chips. You're not going to want to miss this, okay? But another interview that I saw was with Billy Corgan and Daryl Hall. It was a 2-part interview. And I chimed in on part 2. And Billy's actually a pretty good interviewer, but he was having a hard time with Daryl Hall, I could tell. Daryl was very, very guarded. And I'm not sure how much Daryl has left upstairs. I'm just being honest. Right? Like he was having some issues remembering some things, but it wasn't like if you watch Brett Favre and he's shaking and shit like that. But it was a really interesting interview because the only thing I got from Daryl Hall in that interview was regret. And one of the things that Billy Corgan asked him about was that Daryl always needed partnerships in his life. And he's like, you were the face of Hall & Oates. Why didn't you just go solo? And he had all this pressure from all these people to remain with John Oates and make the hits, right? Not only that, but his wife, Sarah Allen, who the song Sarah Smiles based on, her sister and Sarah actually contributed to a lot of those huge hits they had in the 80s. Huge. So those were partnerships, both a life partnership and a musical partnership. And the easiest answer to Daryl's question as to why he never left John Oates until he got so acrimonious that they had to, or went out and started something on his own. He nearly started a group with Robert Fripp. Daryl Hall is a Libra. It's that simple, right? He needed that partnership, whatever it was, in order to complete the circuit. And the thing that always amazed me about Hall & Oates is that John Oates is an Aries. And I'm like, how do these guys hold it together? Because in a man or in men, opposite signs create rivals. This is straight out of the lips of Linda Goodman. I'm like, how do these guys hold this together? I mean, you could clearly see that with Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal, which is the Virgo Pisces version of this. And they wound up hating each other, right? The Batman and Robin. Well, who's going to play Batman? So they made it work for a very long time. And now it's just, he won't even say John Oates' name. And Daryl Hall has had, pardon my language, more pussy than every chat combined and probably the rest of your relatives. Although who knows, maybe you've got a relative or two that got real busy. But he had everything. Everything. I knew a guy who road managed Hall & Oates in Japan. He said it was horrible. He liked John Oates. He said he was a super nice guy. He said Daryl was a dick. And he played tennis all the time with John Oates. John Oates loves tennis. But Daryl would send him out into the audience. Now, this is in Japan, and there are obviously Japanese women in America. And so Daryl had types, and he had to find them types. He had to find those types for Daryl and give them backstage passes and say, hey, Daryl, I'd like to meet you after the show. And he would do a shotgun effect because not all of them would come. Some would be with their boyfriends. And women would leave their boyfriends at concerts to go be with rock stars. This is not uncommon. The guys from all these bands did it. And then the roadies sometimes would catch a little of the action before the stars did. So this is the life that Daryl Hall led. Privilege, power, pussy, triple P. And I'm watching him with Billy Corgan, and all I get is regret. He says he would do everything differently. I'm like, really? Like, I don't know what's going on in your soul, but Daryl, you got some work to do. Anyway, let's get on with the show. I had to drop a little astrology in there. All right. It is the show. Let's get on with the weather part of the show. Yes, let's stop the share. And let's go back again and take 2. And there we are. I'll come back one more time, and I will minimize my importance in this presentation, at least graphically speaking. All right, there we go. We're in that first decan of Libra, and we're just trying to balance. We're just trying to balance everything, and we're like the flying Walendas right now, and we're up on the high wire, and we're balancing our personal lives. We're balancing our spiritual lives, which are our personal lives, but also what's going on in the world. I had to get up this morning and go to Home Depot really quickly to get something because I needed to do a little fix it before and sooner rather than later. And as I'm checking out, it's early. It's just me and the gal who's got the 5 a.m. shift. And this gets into the balance part, by the way. And I said, so what do you get off at, like 11 or 12? So I'm working half days now. I want to get back on full days. I said, oh, but I have to work half days because I make too much money. I said, really? Why? Well, my daughter, I'm assuming the daughter's young. My daughter had a transplant. We're talking heart transplant. A heart transplant in a preteen, 6 or 7. And because she got married, she now makes too much money for her daughter to get medical care at the rate that they were getting. And I think she makes too much money, so Home Depot had to cut her off or something now. It's weird, right? So she had to cut back on her hours so she could keep the medical care because her daughter's medicine costs $800 a month. And whatever other bills they rack up because who knows why I didn't inquire why she got a transplant at an early age. But that's what I'm talking about with balancing. She's having to balance the books in her household. She's having to balance her schedule. She's having to do this huge balancing act. And that's where a lot of us are. And it's a real precarious position to be, especially when there are people around you or in your inner circle who are clearly off balance. And we're all there to some degree or another. And if you're in a good space, I hope you're using that to use some of that goodwill and good energy to bring some balance to other people's lives if you feel so inclined to do that. Nobody says you have to do anything, right? But sometimes when you're a little flush, you can be a little flush with others in your own generous and abundant way. So we have a nice grand trine here. And I'm taking this grand trine as a sign. It might, when we talk about something dire like shit hits the fan situation, I've always been an advocate of being able to buy time. Like that's what you want. You may not want a full-on survival compound, although that may be a beautiful thing if you're wired for that and you have the people to support you with that. Go for it. right? But for most of us, that's not where we are. And so what we do is we hopefully have enough on hand so we can make it through these periods of chaos and not to have to go run to the FEMA camp for food or water or whatever else they're offering up because the shelves are bare, right? So you need to buy yourself time. And when you're going through a crisis or when it's the same thing with Libra, you have to buy yourself time. You have to be able to balance these things in your life so that when the chaos subsides a bit or your own personal tumult seems to quiet, right? It's much easier to make decisions based on that. So today is one of those days where I think if you can make some internal agreements, because Libra is all about agreement, right? If you can make some internal agreements so that you individually can start turning some corners. And again, I hope you can join me on 15 because this Larry Wilcox video is one of the most brilliant things I've seen. And it's not even advertised anywhere on some major channel or anything like that. It's because I watch a lot of like, behind the scenes stuff, Hollywood music. It showed up on my feed. So the story here is that Larry Wilcox made a huge internal adjustment and he turned a corner. And with the sun and Pluto and Uranus, these are quarter turning energies. Even if Uranus and Pluto are retrograde, this is an auspicious time to go back and I wouldn't say make up for things, but you can retrace your steps and you can see where you might have taken a few wrong steps. And you can right those wrongs and you can bring balance back into your life. It may not be easy though. It may not be easy. When you have some breaking down crying and having an existential crisis, you don't want to rob them of their pain. It's their pain is one of the most critical things they can experience, but you also don't want to abandon them either. And that's the balancing part. I'll share this on 15 too, because a bit of a different audience over there. Some of you guys cross over, but and I just told them, I said, look, you're going to need equal parts support and resolve to get through this. And I'm here to support you any way I can. And the resolve is going to be up to you. And that's the part that we have to have responsibility for our lives. Also have to have support. It's really important. And I heard Julie talking about Chattaria and how during that time people were so nice to her and kind. And it's kind of an amazing function that a group of fairly anonymous strangers can perform for one another. And I'm grateful for that. That whatever this is, that it's a conduit for many of you to support one another so that you can retain your resolve. We have Mercury in Libra and it's squaring Jupiter. Is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? Daryl Hall, it's half empty. Like, I think Daryl Hall is the epitome of somebody who has not done any work. I mean, I think he has, but there's something there. There's something eating away at Daryl. And even with the success of Daryl's house and all the stuff he's done, you can just tell. Watch about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and Corgan keeps trying to draw him out. And Billy's turned into a pretty good interviewer. And he relates to these musicians from the music side. So he knows all about the business. And Daryl was getting the business for sure because he's in the business. We got the moon in Scorpio. Anytime you have the moon and Mars joining forces in the underworld, sleep can be very disturbing. Because one of the things that happens during your sleep is you're in touch sometimes, or at least your subconscious is in touch with you. It's never not in touch with you, by the way. Even in your waking moments, your quote unquote subconscious is there. But you have less control over the process around it. So there's very little filter. And the moon is an amplifier. This is my feeling. As much as Jupiter is an amplifier, especially in a square mode, the moon is an amplifier. The moon is not what we think it is. I think it's completely artificial, performs an artificial function. And when you combine it with astrology, it amplifies whatever connection it has to whatever planet it is having an alignment with. Sometimes I think in a fairly unnatural way. So we're just coming off that Moon-Mars conjunction for the last couple of days. Kind of hairy, right? Kind of, the energy's been kind of hairy the last 48 hours. And we're only halfway through that moon in Scorpio. Now we're in the second decan, which is the Piscean decan. This is the decan where, man, there's just nothing I can do. Right? You're headed into sort of Neptunian territory. And what do we have here? We've got a sesquisquadrate with Neptune. See the little broken line? Sesquisquadrates are interesting because they're linked to family issues, generational family issues. It's often misunderstood lesser aspect, right? And it's often been equated to having a pebble in your foot, a small pebble in your foot. It's annoying, but if you have to keep walking, you can. But that's what it feels like. And it's there to get your attention. So you have to stop at some point, untie your shoes or whatever. And it's interesting because it's on the sole of your feet, which is Pisces. And so usually this sesquisquadrate, this minor annoyance, which does have some connection with family patterns, especially when it's in sesquisquadrate with the moon, does bring that up at kind of a soul level, because we're talking about the Piscean decan, a Neptune, the ruler Pisces retrograding, coming back. Now, by tomorrow, this moon is going to start to move into that final decan, which is Scorpio, and Cancer. And I feel like a lot of this tension that's brewing here domestically is going to really start to pop. We had the massive ice. It wasn't massive. It was just a shoot around the roof in Dallas. Oh, what about Dallas? What do we know about Dallas? Oh, yeah. There was that assassination that happened there. Another thing that we haven't completely healed from. Now we're just supposed to move on from Charlie Kirk and start selling Charlie Kirk merch and opening chapters of the Charlie Kirk Church on every campus across America that wants it. And I'm not here to demean Charlie Kirk by any stretch, but the demands that are being put on us socially to accept this in a particular way are completely unnatural. It brings up every conspiracy theory and lie we've ever been told. And we're at this place now where the cat is out of the bag. Another thing that grabbed my attention is the young Gen Z guy had this older, I didn't even know who they were. They were talking about Israel. And this Gen Z kid, he's got the They Live glasses on. It's not Nick Fuentes. He's much more, I don't know, kind of Ivy League in some ways than Nick Fuentes. But they're having this open discussion about what's going on in Israel and how everybody who can see it now, it's all out in the open now, And when things like that become visible, that's when things get very dangerous. Because a lot of societies or groups in societies, when they go bad, their covert activity becomes exposed. It was always there, but for whatever reason, the veil is being removed. And that's when those groups get very particular about their turf. Let's put it that way. All right, let's get into our star of the day. So I got to try to be timely here. All right. Okay. So our True Hemp Science star of the day is none other than Barbara Wawa. Barbara Walters. You can see Barbara Walters in her chart. Her career is in her chart. Clearly, Walters is not her last name. Her parents, of course, are Ukrainian. She descends from Ukrainian Jews who settled in New York. And she was raised in show business. Her father was like a Broadway Danny Rose kind of character. He was the director of the Ziegfeld Follies in 1943. So Barbara Walters grew up around celebrity. It was almost like by birth she was groomed for it. And you can, the sun and Saturn are the father. So Saturn here in the third house is more like father is big brother, less like father, but the sun is also the father as well. The sun is the father until you're 7. And then Saturn becomes the father because that's when the father has to start to be disciplined and all that other stuff, right? Theoretically. So she's a double Libra, and you can tell why she was good at what she did. She, in her time, was the go-to interviewer, whether it was celebrities, heads of state, gossip, and she was the first kind of news person on the Today Show. And there were other women who were there before her on the Today Show, 2 of them who stand out. One was Lee Merriweather, the other was Florence Henderson, who would later go on to play Mrs. Brady, right? And she called them all tea pouring girls, which is a little insulting, but I understand where she's coming from. The thing about Barbara Walters is that she could at times appear, again, being very masculine and being very feminine. You can see that with that Venus-Mars conjunction. And over there in the 7th house, Venus-Uranus, Pallas-Uranus conjunction, my bad. Over in the 7th house. And having interviews. She's a media pioneer. Like whatever you think of her. She was kind of there from the beginning. And her status as an interviewer is locked in stone. It's a Mercury-Mars conjunction. I'm still kind of waking up after my early rising. So she was very aggressive in terms of her career pursuits, but also very successful. She has Moon in Gemini, Jupiter in Gemini, 9th house. She travels everywhere. She had access to anybody on the planet. Married 3 times. None of them worked out really, really well. Also known as a bit of a hussy on the side. That's a different story. You can see the view. I like how I did that. You can see the view in her chart with Venus and Neptune. 11th house. She created the view. And that's the house of groups, right? And she has Venus and Leo. And what did she do? She created essentially a coven of shrews, all over opinionated, and I think ultimately quite divisive. But the view, she started it in 2015 the early 2000s. I think she last appeared on TV in 2015. And nobody's seen her in public since. She's still around. But you can see the view here, right? And the long-term reach with that Saturn trine with the view. Did everything come easy to her? No, I don't think so. She had a leg up, clearly, because of her background. But with that Sun-Saturn square, to me, that is kind of indicative in some ways of her relationship with men. And having to kind of fight in a man's world in a lot of ways. But she does look at times less feminine than others. I mean, you'll get that with Mars in the first house. But she has Pluto also in the 10th. And a lot of her interviews were sort of groundbreaking and game-changing. She interviewed Castro. Like the line of questions, that's a whole other story. And she has Chiron and the true node in the 8th house. What's interesting about her is that she went to a kind of finishing school in high school. It was like a liberal arts, but it wasn't a yeshiva school. It wasn't a Jewish school. It was a school that was preparing her to become the person that she eventually became. She started off in copywriting, and she would write copy and ads, and eventually she started to write some copy for NBC and Today, and there she is back in her glory days. And she lasted a very long time. She's got that Vesta conjunct Pluto. It's pretty wide, 10 degrees. But her flame burned a long time. They had to wheel her off the fucking set. I mean, I think she's an interesting person in the sense that you can really see her chart. And it's that double Libra. And her and Larry King were the two main voices that were interviewing people. She interviewed every single president from Kennedy, including Biden and Trump, although they weren't president at the time. So there you go. There's your True Hemp Science Star of the Day. And I got to just shout out the Moonlight before we go. If you're having some issues sleeping, you can get this in the gummy form. Let me show you what it looks like. Get these rosin gummies. That's what you'll take before you go to bed. You want to take it about a half an hour before you go to bed. And it's got 2.3 milligrams of THC, 60 milligrams of CBD, and 111 milligrams of CBG in a way that only Chris can cut it. So if you're having some issues sleeping, they also have it in a tincture mode. If you're not into chewing the gummy, there is some sugar on there. So if you want the uncut version, there's a tincture version of this. You get on the website. Type in 15MINS and you'll get the goodie bag that comes along with your order. Spend $150 more, you get free shipping, and there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. Guaranteed to you. All right, that's it. I really hope you join me over on 15 because I can kind of cut loose a little bit more, talk about where things are. And it'll be kind of unfiltered today. So you might enjoy that. And again, the third tease, 9 minutes of this seemingly innocuous interview with Eric Estrada's partner on Chips can change your life. I'm serious. So please join me over there. We'll get into a little bit of music, and that's it. Use your head in order to discern it's real, your heart to stay open as possible. Hit the like, subscribe, buy me a cup of coffee if you like. I'm still open for readings, and I'm digging my way out of the backlog here that this interesting little event in my life has helped facilitate. Anyway, that's it. God bless you all. Love you all. Treat each other well. Bye for now.